Welcome to the Otherweb. Our guest today is Jordan Miller, the driving force behind the Satori network. Jordan decided to combine AI, cryptocurrency, and philosophy to create an oracle that predicts the future. Sounds kind of crazy, right? Well, we reached out to Jordan to find out. Jordan, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Thank you for joining. So, you predict the future using AI and crypto. How does that work?
Okay, yes. So I'm the founder of a crypto AI project called Satori. And Satori is a future oracle. So it predicts the future basically of anything and everything, with a little caveat, anything that people care about. So one of the reasons that it's a distributed system is that it has a token that people can then use to guide its attention. And I think that's really the best use case of a token. But I don't know, that's the very basic idea of the entire Satori system. A distributed system that predicts the future, and we can listen in on those AI conversations.
So which part of this is AI, and how does this differ from a prediction market where people are just betting on what the future is?
This requires no human labor, first of all. You could use your own human labor to publish predictions, but this is using AI labor by default. So with this system, you might go to the website, download the Satori Neuron. That's the little piece of software you can run on your machine. So this is a global network of Satori neurons running on anybody's machine around the world.
Okay.
And when you download that and start running it, it has an AI engine inside of it. It starts listening to something out there in the real world, like maybe data streams about the environment or the economy, stock prices, government statistics. It starts listening to the real world. And it starts to build these models. The AI engine just runs all day, every day, building models of what those things will do in the future. So it makes a prediction, publishes the prediction, anybody can listen to it, and then it waits for the future to happen, and then it sees if it was correct or not, and updates its model, and just continually tries to build a better model and improve its predictions over time.
So if I download and install it on my machine, does it listen to my actions, what I post on social media, things like that, or what I do in my own free time, like browse the internet? Or does it only listen to publicly available information?
Basically, publicly available information. You could produce a data stream, though, that is, anything. It could be your social media data or whatever. And if you wanted it to predict that, you could set it up to predict that.
We used to have the software that you could download and run on your PC instead of the idle task is using up the spare cycles, which would try to find a protein that might be useful against cancer, right? And I ran this. I know a lot of people that ran this. It did not actually lead to a cure for cancer. Now it looks like AlphaFold, which is centralized, is likely going to be able to do that. So the question is, if you are using publicly available information to try to do something beneficial for everybody, like predict the future, then why would a distributed model be necessary or useful, as opposed to just, if this is valuable, and it likely is, it could run on one big server farm?
Okay, good question. Satori needs to listen to everything in the world. So the bandwidth alone seems like it's well suited for a distributed system. It needs to listen to everything that happens in the whole world. And that's because it needs to be able to correlate anything with anything. We can't correlate everything with everything. That's just too much cost. But we need to be able to correlate anything with anything. And the reason for that is, like, let's say there's a data stream where it's predicting your health, given some biometric data streams that you provide or something, maybe provided by your smartwatch or whatever. If all of a sudden you see that those predictions are tanking, like there's a problem that's going to happen in the very near future, and you don't really know why, because you haven't changed any of your habits majorly, you need to be able to say, what is this being affected by? And be able to see, oh, it's being affected by a problem with my local water source or something. And so we can have very, very, very disparate connections that come into play only every once in a while, but we still need to be able to model those in order to be able to model the future or what the future holds.
I see. So you're essentially making a kind of cellular architecture where everybody listens to their local environment, and then these cells connect, sort of like they do in CDMA.
Yeah, I would say that's probably true, but local environment can get very abstract. But yes, I would say generally speaking, I think that's probably very true.
What is the incentive for a particular person to download this and run this on their machine? I can understand curing cancer is at least a benevolent incentive. I am donating spare cycles and maybe a few cents on my electricity bill to try to solve a big societal problem. Does society benefit from predicting the future better? If so, in what way?
Oh, I think it really, really does benefit. And so a future oracle is something we don't have. So the way I define a future oracle is it's something that predicts the future, generally speaking, like the general future, the most broadest trends and something that affects all of us. So it predicts the future, and everybody knows that it's basically the best prediction of the future you can get. That's what a future oracle is, and we don't have one on the earth today. If we did have one, then we would all know, we would be able to act as one, as a collective. Because in order to act as one, you have to kind of all be in consensus with where you think you're going. What actions are you taking, and what future will that lead to as a society, as a civilization? Since we don't have one right now, what happens is we bicker and we fight, and we have economic incentive to fight for things that may or may not be true. We don't get much done. So having a future oracle allows, I think, humanity or civilization to be more adaptable to what the future holds and anticipate it before it occurs and take action collectively to change it if it's disaster, or stay the course if it's the right way to go. So, when I think about that, I think of an analogy. I think about a baby, and a baby is a nervous system. It's a brain, and it's got lots of little neurons. Each little neuron doesn't see everything that happens, but it's a collection of neurons that are all trying to predict the future. They clump together in like mini columns. Those mini columns are trying to create a holistic view of the world and trying to predict the future. And until I see the future or prediction of the future as the fundamental layer of intelligence. So until the baby can get a hold of that, it's just flailing its arms about. It's just trying to figure out what's connected to what and just trying to understand. It has to build this foundation of future prediction in order to be able to control its body, in order to act as one unit, the brain. So I don't know if that's a good analogy. Having studied the brain a little bit, it's good for me, but...
It's a good analogy, but I have to bring it back down to earth a little bit.
Sure.
And challenge two possible weaknesses in this model, if I may. So the first one is you assume that people will agree that the prediction is correct. I think that even with the best predictors we've ever had, people still bicker and argue like there's no tomorrow. Like Nate Silver is great at predicting the outcomes of elections. How many people believe Nate Silver? Substantially less than should, right? That's one obvious weakness that you should probably address. The other one is the assumption that if people agree on what the trend is, they will agree on whether it's good or bad and what they should do about it. I'll give you an obvious thing that I don't think anybody disputes. Birth rates are going down. We all know this. Right and left agree that they are going down. The facts are indisputable. And yet, if you try to ask people what should be done about it, the prescriptions you're going to get are not just diametrically opposed to each other, they are all over the map, going all the way from people who think good humans are a plague upon the earth, right? All the way to yes, and therefore we should go back to biblical norms where men shall not spill their seed, in vain. So, so how would actually this work? I don't see this fostering cooperation unless you can address these two issues.
Well, those examples that you gave, I think, are really good examples of siloed data. So this future Oracle system needs to de-silo all the data and make a holistic worldview. Once you have that holistic worldview, you can add layers and layers of understanding. So you then start to understand, well, this is good in this case, it's bad in this case, it's good for, this system or bad for that system. But you don't just have this bifurcation where good or bad, generally speaking. So I don't know if that helps, but it feels like one of the main things is you have to build a holistic world model in order for everything to be trusted as it can be. This is one of the things with the Otherweb, right? The whole point of the app and the service is to take all this data that we have, get rid of maybe bias and say, well, this is obviously biased, and then to summarize using AI. Is that about right?
It is about right, but you have to then continue the sentence and say, and that serves as the input for people to now exercise their own judgment in a better way.
Exactly.
Right? So we create the nutrition label, we create the summary, and now people decide what they're going to consume next in a better way than they could otherwise. But we are still assuming people are going to use this in very different ways. That some people will actually disable all the left-wing sources. Some people will actually disable all the right-wing sources. Some people will just want to read a small number of articles, but only the best ones. Some people are speed readers and they want to read a lot, right? So my question to your model is then, how do you account for this variability that, yes, you gave a prediction, birth rates are going down. You might even give predictions of what does this mean for the ecosystem? Will we have basically more bison in the US? Will we have more greenery around? I don't know what other things might be downstream of that. And then on the opposite side of that ledger, will we have more elderly people and nobody to support them? Will welfare systems be strained? You can predict all these things. And I still think that A, the percentage of people that will trust your prediction is probably between 40 and 50 best case.
Sure.
And B, among those, the percentage of people that will agree with a single course of action is also 40 or 50 best case. Am I wrong?
Right. Yeah. And that's kind of a long-term vision. It's kind of the long-term view. But I would say, like, with the Otherweb, for instance, the point is to get to the truth as fast as possible, right? And what we've seen with centralized AI, especially these large language models, is that since they're being trained on human language, which is full of bias and propaganda and like economic incentive, and since they're not only trained on this, but their error metric is determined by humans and who are full of economic incentive and bias and trauma that they're trying to fix and all this kind of stuff, we find that our large language models have this kind of stuff built in. And so we would like to find a way to get to real down-to-earth, real truths without all these layers of, well, I'm right-wing or I'm left-wing, so I'm going to ignore that side. We just really want the truth. And so this is one thing that I think Satori can provide, because it's not trained on, it doesn't use groupthink as its error metric. It uses the actual raw data of the future as its error metric. So if it makes bad predictions, then it very quickly says, what do I not understand about what is actually happening in the real world? And it doesn't rely on any human intervention or curating the data in order to. Now, what it does, though, what we do want it to do is pay attention to things we care about. because we want it to be predicting the future for us. So you do need a mechanism by which humans can guide its attention, but not manage its training. And that's the point of having it be decentralized and having as many people as possible hold some of the token and be able to say, this is what I think Satori should be predicting, and guide its attention based on the full population.
Okay, so the person downloading a particular instance of this has control over where to point it, essentially?
Actually, anybody that holds the token has control over where to point it, because they will say, okay, this data stream is sanctioned by the network. This one is approved, and this one is not. Anybody can still predict the ones that are not, but they won't get any reward for doing so. So it's not economically incentivized to predict those data streams. So they control the economic incentive, and that's basically the point of it.
Interesting. So one thought that I keep having from the very beginning of this discussion is flashbacks to various stories from Isaac Asimov. Whether you're trying to build multivac or you're trying to build psychohistory, I don't know which one of these directions you're going to, but it seems to be one of these two. Can you tell me which one, or maybe a third one I'm not thinking of?
I have not read that that stuff, that genre.
Now you can actually watch it on Apple TV. They have a version of The Foundation that is very different from the original, and I guess every hero that Isaac Asimov had there, except Harry Seldon, has been replaced by a black woman, I think. But in general, Harry Seldon is still there. And he's the guy who is the mathematician who invented psychohistory, which allows to predict the future based on the accumulated knowledge of people's biases. Sort of.
Ah, very cool. Very cool.
So it's supposed to happen many centuries from now. You're trying to jump the gun, I think.
I suppose, yes. Now, to answer your previous question, I think there's another thing. Since we're doing this on a network, we can have lots of models predicting the same data stream. So we see this in the brain. You don't have just one, neuron or bundle of neurons that can recognize the letter A, for instance. You have lots of bundles of neurons that can recognize the letter A. So in the brain, we have something called unique redundancy, where we kind of have this repeating circuit, but every portion is a little bit unique. And we also have that as another example on just our human civilization. We're able to build skyscrapers and technology and all this cool stuff because we have unique redundancy. We're all basically the same structure. We're a human brain, but we specialize and we understand slightly different things. So we're unique. We are unique, but we're also redundant. So Satori, being a federation of AIs, has this same pattern because you download the Satori node, and what is it? It's the AI engine that's producing these models. It's producing it kind of the same way in every case, but each model is listening to different inputs to make its prediction. So every model is unique, but you can point them at some of the same things. You can have a competition of like 20 modelers or 20 of these neurons, all trying to predict the price of gold or something. And so you can have unique redundancy among those 20. Now, that unique redundancy is what gives us the wisdom of the crowd in humans. So you can literally just take their average prediction, and that's a pretty good prediction over the long run. You can always just average it. I think that also helps answer your question about, well, why would people believe this? Or, it's because it's not just one thing. It's a whole ecosystem of AI bots talking to each other, competing, and they all have this unique redundancy kind of pattern instantiated on the network.
The caveat to this is that the average person cannot actually open the code and read and decide for themselves whether they can trust your code. So they will trust what some pundit wrote about that code. And therefore, they will just decide that, yes, it is redundant, but it's 20 instances of the same code I don't trust making this prediction.
Right. Right. It's possible. Yeah. Yeah. But I think if it, the what is it? The proof is in the pudding, right? It feels like, well, if Satori continues to scale and grows, and the more it scales, the more information it has, and the more information it has, the better its predictions should be. So if it gets to a point where it's making pretty good predictions on, stuff that we care about, that it's like, well, I don't care how it works or why it works. I just care that it works. And it's obvious that it does. So that's going to take scale and it's going to take further development, but I think we can get there.
So for this to be the case, you need some mechanism to actually publish your predictions in real time. And then somebody perhaps occasionally writing content that compares those predictions to reality.
Yes, that's right. And I think the Satori Foundation would do some of those comparisons. Anybody could do them. It's all open data. But I think the end goal, like right now, you can go to the Satori website and you can see some of the predictions that are being published, and you can just search for, data streams. But we're still in beta, so it's just kind of, I don't know, play data and boring stuff. But the end goal is to say, on top of this whole ecosystem of AIs talking to each other, we will then add an LLM kind of interface that takes in this data in real time all the time and is always retraining, that you can literally talk to. So you'll go to the website, you'll just ask a question, it'll tell you, and you'll say, well, why do you think that? And it'll tell you, and you can say, well, if I think that this other thing is true, how does that change your answer? And it will tell you. So you can have a conversation with the future, essentially, is the end goal.
So it's literally an oracle, but you don't have to sacrifice any virgins in the process.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I have 2 questions about human nature, and you can pick which of these you want to answer.
Sure.
The first one is, what is the chance that everybody who downloads a node or everybody who owns tokens is going to just point it into predicting the price of financial assets? That seems to be what most sentiment analysis is used for right now. And I have a friend who runs algorithmic trading for a very large bank, and basically all of their ML efforts are pointed to trying to predict things based on scraping data and using sentiment analysis models.
Right.
The second prediction is, what is the chance that the moment you publish a prediction, it alters history, and therefore either it forces history to be that, or it forces history to be not that. But either way, it's no longer a valid prediction.
That feedback loop is a fun one. Well, let's go to the first one. Everybody's going to want to use this for economic incentives, right? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably true. Some people will, we care about other things. So there will always be probably a minority that also wanted to predict other stuff. Mainly, I assume, the environment. That's a big thing. Everybody wants to know. And so if this can predict that, that'd be great. But I'll say, let's say we all just wanted to predict the markets. Well, the markets are really high entropy, very difficult to predict. Okay, so that's for a budding network that doesn't have a lot of compute, that's going to be a very hard thing for it to predict. But people will still point it there. But then they'll realize, I think, or maybe the bots will realize, that if I ingest data about demographics or about government statistics, mainly probably, then I can start making better predictions about the markets. And so even if they start with saying, I just want to know the price of gold tomorrow, it will start to branch out and start to look at what it can correlate with this. And then it will discover, or people will discover perhaps, that if it can ingest the prediction of, the demographic changes in the US or something, then it can make even better predictions. Because what it's doing by ingesting a prediction that some other neuron has made is leveraging the work that the other neuron has done. It doesn't have to listen to every data stream that other neuron has already processed.
But in that scenario, your error compounds. So whatever your error was in the first prediction is now input to the second prediction. So it's less precise than the first one, right?
I'd say it compounds mainly if you're predicting on top of, I would say, like, if I'm predicting the 4-hour price of gold and you want to predict it 8 or 16 hours ahead, and so you do that by predicting my prediction, and I'm predicting somebody else's prediction, then the error
No, but
really...
let's use your example, right? You said demographic trends feeding into something. So let's say I want to look at demographic trends, make a prediction about that, and feed that into the long-term price of medical services in the US, or how much the medical industry is going to grow. I'm using that because that seems to be a big theme, right? There's more old people, therefore medicine is a good investment. Well, my prediction about demographics is going to be, to the extent that it's different from common knowledge, it's going to be, let's say, 70% accurate. And my prediction about how that affects the price of some nursing company stock is, let's say, also 70%. Well, 70 times 70% is 49%.
Right.
So I started with a good prediction, but the error is compounding if I'm predicting based on the prediction as opposed to based on observable data.
Right. Okay. I see what you're saying. You don't have to take, you don't have to say, I'm always, like your model, the model that you're creating or that your AI engine is creating. It doesn't have to use that prediction at all times. So the hardest part is figuring out in which context is this other prediction that somebody has made going to be of benefit to me, because I want to keep the 70% and throw away the 30%, right? I'm only going to listen to it when I think it's a good input to my model. So I would say that's the solution to that problem.
That has an error in it as well. So it's turtles all the way down, no?
Well, what I'm hearing is that this is impossible to do, but this is exactly what the brain does. It has nothing else but the future to create an error metric from and use that error metric to learn from. It has nothing else. It can only say, okay, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's in the outside world. Here's what I do know. I'm in time, and there's going to be another minute or another instance coming in of data. So I'm going to get new data. Well, if I can start to predict that data, then I can get a hold of everything else. So this is the only error metric that the brain uses at the base level. And
Right.
so in principle, what I'm describing is possible. Like these challenges you're bringing up, they are definitely valid.
I'm not saying it's impossible. Where I'm getting with this is that it seems like this system will likely have the same error rate as our brain, which errors quite a bit.
But we can't listen to everything. I have a few interests, right, and, I kind of feel like I can see the future of those things, but I don't know the future of the price of wheat in, wherever. So we can't listen to everything. But I do have this nervous system that is branched out into my body, and I can feel things, see things, hear things. And I've got a real good hold of my body. I can move any way I want all the time. So in the domain of things that I can listen to all of it at the same time and correlate all of it that I need to, I have practically full control. And so that's the kind of control that I'm trying to give to humanity with the Satori project.
Right. So I want to bring this back to the optimistic side of things. You mentioned that if we can agree on where a particular trend is taking us, then maybe we can cooperate in a better way. Can you lay out your vision of what cooperation might look like? How does humanity flourish with this kind of technology as the basis?
Throughout our evolutionary past, we don't have huge claws or teeth or whatever. What we do have, you might say, is intelligence or language, and that gives us an edge. But I think very generally, what we have that has gotten us this far is our adaptability. We can adapt to any environment using that language and intelligence. Okay, so now we're in this environment where you might say, well, we had to adapt to living on the plains or in the forest or, this or that or whatever. And then we started having language. We had to adapt to now living in a society, in a social structure. Then we started building technology. We had to adapt to larger nation state kind of systems where we're not just little tribes anymore. And we had to adapt to this technology evolving along with us. And now technology is evolving very, very fast, really, really fast. And it seems like we need to upgrade our adaptability to be able to survive, probably. So what I think that looks like is being able to anticipate the future before it happens on a global societal scale. The way in which, people come together and kind of use that information and I don't know. I'm not sure. But I can see this large trend of we need to learn how to adapt to the future more quickly.
Yeah. We can go down this huge rabbit hole of whether a distributed AI system can predict how good AI will become,
right,
and how it will affect our future, because that seems to be the biggest question on everybody's mind. Everybody seems to have forgotten about nuclear weapons, and they're just worried about AI these days. But I think you can sort of predict how nuclear weapons are going. Predicting AI is something I'm asked to do a lot when I go and do interviews on other media sources. I have no idea. I don't think anybody does. We can basically lay out the tree of possibilities or the range of possibilities. But anyway, we'll leave that to another episode, I guess. You have final words?
I don't know, the media future or whatever, but I can see a very, very large trend, and maybe that can provide some kind of context for people's ideas about what's going to happen. And the very large trend is that all of our technology is continually working towards getting us more interconnected, informationally speaking. So we used to have to use couriers and, whatever, and then pigeons, and then, maybe we invented the mail system, and then telegraphs and TV and radio and cell phones. And so we're always getting more and more interconnected with each other and with technology as a byproduct of that process. And I think that has a trend, and it's going to continue until when? We can ask ourselves, when is that going to end? And we might say, well, once we get to the point where we have brain-to-computer interfaces, which allow us to do brain-to-brain interfaces, that allow us to communicate from one brain to another at the speed at which our corpus callosum connects the two hemispheres of our brain, that seems like I can't see any further than that. That seems like the end of the trend. That's where it's going. So I don't know where that puts us right now in the cycle of AI, but that's what technology is doing. So
yeah, I have a tendency to take the devil's advocate position in everything, as you've noticed. And I also played chess competitively for 10 years. So I could mention that in chess, the way that the trend has progressed is you add more and more connectivity. You switch from informators to chess base to playing with people online and all the information being shared, all the way to the point where computers are so good that right now to play in a chess tournament, you have to essentially be strip searched, basically, and you're not allowed to go to the bathroom, and you're not allowed to even wear a watch. And so, like, at this point, connectivity has gone to the point where now we must be disconnected in order to practice this art, because there is the ability to use any centralized computer, no matter how small.
You can cheat.
That is better than all of us together.
Yes, right? Amazing. Wow.
So there is a chance that we're going in that direction. I'm not so sure, but maybe.
Yeah. To your other question, you mentioned, what about the feedback loop of you start making predictions, let's say they're good, and then people start using those predictions, so they trade on them. This is what makes markets very high entropy. That feedback loop, I think, has a tendency in the long run to be, maybe in the short run, it tends to undo itself. But it seems like in the long run, it seems to be a self-fulfilling prophecy, or I should say on the broadest scales in the long run. So that is another reason that the Satori system should be decentralized and not centralized into a singular entity, because we don't want any one entity to be in control of making self-fulfilling prophecies that affect all of us. So I think that's an important point.
Yeah, on that point, I can mention, and I'm treading in dangerous waters here because mentioning this person in the US is flammable.
Oh.
But if you read George Soros's early books, and he studied philosophy under Karl Popper, so he's really a philosopher and not quite a trader that just went into trading accidentally. Then he had this theory of self-reflexivity, that he was predicting the markets based on the idea that the markets do not search equilibrium, but rather that they have certain trends that self-reinforce themselves and basically go away from equilibrium because they feed into themselves. And he was mostly trying to predict those kind of trends because they are the secular alpha that most of the market is searching for.
Wow.
So it sounds like this happens, but if you look at his work and if you look at the markets in general, it seems like it happens about half of the time. It's not like short-term things are self-reflexive, long-term they are mean reverting, or vice versa. It seems like some things are self-reflexive and some things are mean reverting, right?
Oh, wow. That's interesting. I'll have to study more about that.
Yeah. Trading is interesting in itself, and it's funny how people from different disciplines end up into it. I think the best trader in the US right now is a physicist. So I'll leave it at that. All right. Well, thank you so much, Jordan. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
I hope we can talk again sometime soon.
Yeah, this was fun.
This has been another episode of The Otherweb. Join us next time for more discussion about AI, crypto, news, media, predicting the future, or anything in between.